The sound of my son's voice still echoes in my mind 3 months later. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house," just like that. 40 years of memories. Dismissed with the casual tone you'd use to announce a grocery run. But what he didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment longer than he had been planning it. Sometimes the people who think they know us best are the ones who understand us least. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. The October morning started like any other in my little cottage by the sea. I was sitting in my favorite chair, by the kitchen window, watching the waves crash against the rocks below while my coffee grew cold in my hands. At 78, I'd learned that some of life's greatest pleasures come from these quiet moments, the salt air drifting through the screen door, the cry of seagulls overhead, and the endless rhythm of the ocean that had been my companion for 4 decades. My hip was still tender from the surgery 6 weeks ago, but I was getting stronger every day. Emma, my home health aide, would arrive soon for our morning walk along the beach path. She was a godsend not just for the medical care, but for the companionship. At 45, she had a wisdom that reminded me of myself at that age, when I was raising 3 children and teaching 2nd grade, while my husband Robert worked at the shipyard. The sound of gravel crunching under tires interrupted my peaceful morning. I glanced at the antique clock on the mantel, 8:30. Emma wasn't due until 9. Through the lace curtains, I saw David's silver SUV pulling into my driveway, followed by a large white truck I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. David never came this early, and he certainly never brought trucks with him. I made my way to the front door, leaning heavily on my walker. The morning air was crisp with the promise of autumn, but something felt different today. Wrong, somehow. David stepped out of his vehicle wearing his expensive navy suit, the kind he wore for important business meetings in Boston. His face wore that expression I'd come to dread over the past few months, the look of a man who had made decisions he believed were for everyone's good, whether they agreed or not. "Morning, Mom," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, David." "What's all this?" I nodded toward the truck, where 2 men in work clothes were already unloading boxes and packing supplies. He walked up the porch steps, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Mom, we need to talk. Let's go inside." I didn't move from the doorway. "I think we can talk right here." "What's going on?" David ran his hand through his graying hair, a gesture he'd inherited from his father. "Mom, I've been trying to tell you this for weeks, but you keep putting me off. The house. It's too much for you. Even with Emma's help, you're isolated out here. What if something happens? What if you fall again?" "I didn't fall, David. I tripped over that loose board on the back steps, the one you've been promising to fix for 2 years. His jaw tightened. "That's exactly my point. This place is falling apart. The roof leaks, the heating system is ancient, and the foundation has water damage. It's not safe." I gripped my walker tighter. "So we fix it. I've told you I'm willing to use some of my savings." "Mom." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've already taken care of everything. I've found you a beautiful apartment at Ocean View Manor. It's only 20 minutes from my house, and they have a full medical staff. You'll have friends your own age, activities, meals prepared for you. No more worrying about maintenance or being alone." The blood rushed to my head. "David Sullivan, what exactly are you saying?" He took a deep breath. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, catching myself on the doorframe. "You've what?" "I sold the house. The papers were finalized yesterday. The new owners take possession at the end of the week, but I thought it would be easier if we got you moved and settled first. The movers are here to pack up your things." I stared at my eldest son, the boy I had rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bicycle, cheered for at every baseball game. The man who now stood before me with the casual arrogance of someone who had just stolen my entire life. "You sold my house?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "I sold the family house, yes. Mom, I know this is hard, but you'll see." Without asking me. "I've been trying to discuss this with you for months. Every time I brought up moving, you changed the subject or got upset. Someone had to make the difficult decision. Someone." My voice was getting stronger now, fueled by a rage I hadn't felt since the day the principal tried to force me into early retirement. "Someone. This is my home, David, my home. I didn't ask you to make any decisions for me. He stepped closer, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. Mom, be reasonable. You're almost 80 years old. You can barely walk without that thing. He gestured dismissively at my walker. What if you have another accident? What if Emma can't come one day? You could lie here for hours before anyone found you. So you took it upon yourself to sell my house and put me in a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, it's assisted living. It's very nice. Mom, I chose it myself. You chose it. I shook my head looking at this stranger wearing my son's face. Tell me something, David. How much did you get for my house? His face flushed. That's not important. Humor me. Mum, the important thing is that you'll be safe and… How much, David? He was quiet for a long moment, watching the movers carry empty boxes toward my front door. 850,000. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. When Robert and I bought this cottage in 1984, we paid $62,000. It was a stretch on his shipyard salary and my teacher's income, but we scrimped and saved because we could see the potential. We spent weekends and summers fixing it up, painting the weathered shingles, rebuilding the deck, planting the garden that now bloomed with 40 years of careful tending. $850,000, I repeated. And how much does this assisted living place cost? Mom. How much, David? $5,000 a month. But your Social Security and Dad's pension will cover most of it. And with the house money invested properly. $5,000 a month? I did the math quickly, a skill that came from decades of managing a classroom budget and a household on teachers' wages. That's $60,000 a year. So the money from selling my home. David will pay for about 14 years of keeping me locked away in your little old folks' prison. It's not a prison, Mom, and you're not locked away. I'll visit all the time, and the kids can come see you more often since you'll be closer. The kids. I thought of my granddaughter Sarah, now 16, and grandson Michael, 13. Do they know about this? Do they know their grandfather built that deck with his own hands? Do they know their grandmother planted every flower in that garden? Do they know that their great-grandmother's china cabinet has been in the same corner of the dining room for 40 years? David's face softened slightly. Mom, we'll bring your important things with you. Your photos, some furniture, whatever fits in the apartment. Whatever fits. I looked past him to the cottage that held my entire adult life. The kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals. The living room where we had celebrated birthdays and Christmases. The bedroom where Robert had died peacefully in his sleep just 2 years ago, holding my hand. And what about the rest of it? What about my garden? What about the workshop where your father spent every weekend for 20 years? What about the beach where I walk every morning, where I scattered his ashes? Mom, you'll make new memories. At my age, I laugh bitterly. David, I'm 78 years old. I'm not making new memories. I'm trying to hold on to the ones I have left. One of the movers approached us, a young man with kind eyes, who looked uncomfortable with the conversation he'd obviously been overhearing. Mom, we're ready to start in the living room if that's okay. No, I said firmly. It's not okay. David stepped forward. It's fine. Go ahead. No. My voice was stronger now, carrying the authority I'd used to quiet unruly second graders for 30 years. You will not touch one thing in this house. The mover looked between David and me, clearly unsure who was in charge. David's face hardened. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. The house is sold. The papers are signed. Whether you cooperate or not, you're moving tomorrow. I stared at my son for a long moment, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. This wasn't about my safety or my well-being. This was about money and convenience. $850,000 was a lot of money, and having his mother tucked away in a facility where someone else was responsible for her daily care would make his life much simpler. I said quietly. I want you and these men to leave my property right now. Mom, right now? I'm not leaving without you. Then you're going to be waiting a very long time. We stood there in my doorway, locked in a battle of wills that had been building for months. In the distance, I could hear Emma's little Honda turning into my driveway. Help was arriving, though David didn't know that Emma was far more than just a health aide. She was my friend, my confidante, and as of 2 weeks ago, my secret weapon. Because what David didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have imagined, was that his 78-year-old mother had been planning for this day longer than he had been scheming for it. Sometimes the people who think they know us best are the ones who understand us least. And sometimes, an old woman with a walker can be far more dangerous than a middle-aged man with a briefcase. The war for my independence was about to begin. Emma's timing couldn't have been more perfect. As her small Honda pulled up behind the moving truck, I saw David's face tighten with irritation. He'd never liked Emma, though he'd never said so directly. I suspected it bothered him that I had formed such a close bond with someone he hadn't chosen for me. "Mrs. Sullivan," Emma called out as she approached, her nursing bag slung over her shoulder and a concerned expression on her face. "What's happening here?" "Oh, Emma, dear," I said, relief flooding through me. "My son has some news he'd like to share with you." David straightened his tie, another nervous habit from childhood. "Emma, I'm glad you're here. There's been a change in Mom's living situation. She'll be moving to an assisted living facility tomorrow, so your services won't be needed after today." I watched Emma's face carefully. We had discussed this possibility many times over the past few weeks, but seeing it happen was different from planning for it. Her dark eyes flashed with something David probably mistook for disappointment about losing a job. He didn't know Emma well enough to recognize it as anger. "I see," Emma said calmly. "And Mrs. Sullivan, how do you feel about this move?" "I feel like I'm being kidnapped," I said bluntly. David's jaw clenched. "Mom, you're being dramatic. This is what's best for you." Emma looked at the movers, who were still standing awkwardly by their truck, then back at David. "Mr. Sullivan, forgive me. But has your mother agreed to this move?" "My mother is 78 years old and recently had major surgery. She's not thinking clearly about what's safe for her." That did it. If there was one thing I couldn't tolerate, it was someone suggesting I wasn't mentally competent. "David Michael Sullivan," I said, using his full name the way I had when he was 8 and had broken Mrs. Peterson's window with a baseball. "I have been thinking clearly for 78 years. Including the 30 years I spent teaching children and the 40 years I spent managing this household's finances down to the penny. Do not presume to tell anyone that I'm not thinking clearly." Emma stepped closer to me, and I could feel her support like a warm hand on my back. "Mrs. Sullivan has been my patient for 6 weeks, she said to David. "Her cognitive function is excellent. Her physical therapy progress has been remarkable. In my professional opinion, she is fully capable of making her own decisions about her living situation. And in my opinion as her son," David shot back, "she needs more care than one person can provide in an isolated house that's falling apart." "The house isn't falling apart," I interjected. "It needs some repairs, which I've been asking you to help me arrange for months." "Mom, you can't afford the kind of repairs this place needs. I own this house free and clear. I have savings. I have my pension and Social Security. I think I can manage a few repairs." "You think you can manage but nothing." I was getting tired of this circular argument. "Emma, would you mind helping me inside? I need to sit down." As Emma and I made our way through the front door, I heard David talking to the movers in low, urgent tones. Once we were in the kitchen, Emma immediately went to work, checking my blood pressure and pulse. "Your pressure is elevated," she said, frowning at the reading. "This stress isn't good for you." "What's not good for me is my son treating me like a child," I replied. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She pulled up a chair across from mine. "Always. In your professional opinion, do I need to be in assisted living?" Emma was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "Mrs. Sullivan, you have some mobility limitations from your surgery, but they're improving every week. You're mentally sharp, you manage your medications properly, you eat well, and you have a good support system. Most importantly, you're motivated to maintain your independence. In my experience, that motivation is worth more than all the medical supervision in the world. And if I wanted to stay here, with appropriate help and some home modifications, could I do it safely? With the right support system, absolutely. We'd need to install some grab bars, maybe a ramp for the front steps, and arrange for regular housekeeping help. But Mrs. Sullivan, are you prepared for the fight this is going to be? Your son seems very determined." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emma, can I trust you with something important?" "Of course. 2 weeks ago I called a lawyer." Emma's eyebrows rose. "Oh, my friend Helen recommended her. Patricia Warren, she's an elder law attorney. She specializes in cases where adult children are trying to, how did she put it? Assume inappropriate control over their parents' lives and assets." "What did she tell you?" "She told me that as long as I'm mentally competent, No one, not even my son, can force me to sell my house or move somewhere I don't want to go. She also told me some very interesting things about financial elder abuse. Emma leaned forward. Financial elder abuse? Did you know that in Maine, if an adult child sells their parents' property without proper consent, it can be considered exploitation of an elderly person? It's actually a crime, but surely your son has some kind of power of attorney. I shook my head. Robert and I were very careful about that. We each had powers of attorney for healthcare decisions, but only in the event of incapacity. David has no legal authority to sell my house, move my belongings, or make decisions about my living situation. Emma sat back in her chair. So what he's doing is illegal. The question is, what am I going to do about it? Through the kitchen window, I could see David pacing in the driveway, his phone pressed to his ear. The movers were unloading more boxes, preparing for a packing job that wasn't going to happen. Mrs. Sullivan, Emma said carefully. What exactly are you planning? I smiled at her, the first genuine smile I'd managed since David arrived. I'm planning to show my son that his 78-year-old mother is not as helpless as he thinks she is. But I'm going to need your help. What kind of help? Well, first, I need you to be my witness. I want you to hear me clearly state that I do not consent to the sale of my house, and I do not consent to being moved anywhere. Can you do that? Of course. Second, I need you to help me make some phone calls. Patricia Warren told me exactly what steps to take if this situation arose. And third, I need you to help me pack a bag. Emma looked confused. I thought you said you weren't moving. I'm not moving to assisted living. But I have a feeling I'm going to need to stay somewhere else for a few days while this gets sorted out. Somewhere David can't find me while I figure out how to stop this sale. Mrs. Sullivan, are you sure about this? Fighting family can be complicated. I looked out at my garden, where the chrysanthemums Robert had planted the year before he died were blooming in brilliant yellows and oranges. I thought about the workshop where his tools still hung exactly where he'd left them. I thought about the bedroom where we'd shared 40 years of conversations, dreams, arguments, and quiet moments. I thought about the kitchen table where I'd helped my children with homework and hosted countless holiday meals. Emma, I said, some things are worth fighting for, even if the fight is complicated. Especially if the fight is complicated. She nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? First, call Patricia Warren. Her number is in the address book by the phone. Tell her code red, she'll know what that means. Then call your supervisor and tell her you'll need to take some personal time to help a patient with an emergency situation. Code red. It's what she told me to say if David actually went through with the sale. She's been preparing for this possibility too. Emma stood up. And what about your son? Leave David to me. I've been handling stubborn, strong-willed children for 70 years. This is just the biggest test I've ever faced. As Emma moved toward the phone, I heard David's voice getting louder in the driveway. He was clearly frustrated with whoever he was talking to. Good. It was time he learned what frustration felt like. I made my way back to the front door, moving as quickly as my walker would allow. David was just ending his call, his face flushed with anger. Mom, I just spoke with the buyers. They're expecting to take possession of the house on Friday. That gives us 3 days to get you moved and settled. We can't delay this any longer. David, I said calmly, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I did not agree to sell this house. I do not consent to selling this house, and I will not be moving anywhere. Mom, the sale is already complete. A sale I didn't authorize. A sale you made without my knowledge or consent. I had to do something? You wouldn't listen to reason? Reason? My voice was rising now, but I didn't care. You call stealing someone's home and forcing them into an institution reason. I'm not stealing anything. I'm trying to keep you safe by selling my house for $850,000 and putting me somewhere that costs $60,000 a year to live. David, I wasn't born yesterday. I can do math. His face went white. Are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm stating facts. You sold my house without my permission. You're forcing me to move without my consent, and you stand to benefit financially from both decisions. That's not. I would never. He sputtered, clearly thrown by my directness. David, I'm going to ask you one more time to call off those movers and cancel whatever arrangements you've made for tomorrow. I can't do that, Mom. It's too late. Then you've made your choice, and I've made mine. Emma appeared at my elbow, and I could tell from her expression that she'd made the necessary phone calls. Mrs. Sullivan, Ms. Warren is expecting your call within the hour. She says to tell you she has everything ready to file. David looked between Emma and me, clearly sensing that something had shifted. File what? I smiled at my son, the same sweet smile I'd used when he was little and needed to learn an important lesson. David, dear, you're about to discover that your mother still has a few surprises left in her. The war for my independence was about to begin, and I had just assembled my army. Patricia Warren's voice was crisp and professional when I called her from my bedroom phone, away from David's increasingly agitated pacing in the driveway. Emma sat beside me on the bed, ready to serve as a witness to whatever needed witnessing. Mrs. Sullivan, Patricia said, I've been expecting your call. Are you somewhere safe where you can speak freely? For now, yes, but David is outside with movers, and he's insisting we leave tomorrow morning. All right, let's move quickly. First, I need you to confirm for me, in front of your witness, that you did not give consent for the sale of your property. I looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. I, Margaret Sullivan, did not give my consent for the sale of my house at 47 Oceanside Drive. I was not consulted about the sale, I did not sign any papers, and I do not agree to sell my home. Ho Emma Chen, registered nurse, Emma added clearly. I witnessed this statement and confirm that Mrs. Sullivan appears mentally competent and is making this statement of her own free will. Excellent, Patricia said. Now, Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to listen carefully. What your son has done is illegal under Maine law. He's committed what we call financial exploitation of an elderly person. However, stopping this is going to require some quick action on our part. My heart was pounding. What do we need to do? I'm going to file an emergency petition with the court this afternoon for a temporary restraining order to stop the sale and prevent you from being moved against your will. But you need to understand, your son can still make this very difficult for you. He might try to have you declared mentally incompetent. On what grounds? On the grounds that you're being unreasonable about your living situation. Adult children do this more often than you might think. They get a doctor to say their parent shows signs of dementia or poor judgment, and suddenly the parent loses all legal rights. Emma squeezed my hand. Mrs. Sullivan, you've had a complete cognitive assessment with your doctor just last month. The results were excellent. Good? Patricia said. We'll need those records. Now, Mrs. Sullivan, I have to ask you a hard question. Where can you go for the next few days while we sort this out? Your son will likely escalate his efforts once he realizes you're fighting back legally. I had been dreading this question, though I'd known it was coming. I'm not sure. My other children live across the country. Most of my close friends are in assisted living themselves or have passed away. Mrs. Sullivan, Emma said quietly, you could stay with me. I turned to look at her, surprised. I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. I have a spare room, and honestly, it would make me feel better knowing you're safe while this gets resolved. Patricia's voice came through the phone. That's perfect. Mrs. Sullivan, pack only what you need for a few days. Don't let your son see you doing it. Can you leave within the hour? I think so, but what about David? He'll be furious. Let him be furious. Once I file the restraining order, he'll be legally required to stop all moving activities. If he continues, he could face criminal charges. And the sale. We're going to challenge it on the grounds that it was made without proper authorization. The buyers will have to deal with the legal mess your son has created. Mrs. Sullivan, I want you to understand something. This fight could take weeks or even months to resolve completely. Are you prepared for that? I looked around my bedroom, at the photos of Robert and me on our wedding day, at the quilt my mother had made me when I got married, at the window that faced the ocean I'd watched every morning for 40 years. Yes, I said firmly. I'm prepared. Good. Pack your bag, go with Emma, and I'll call you tonight with an update on the legal proceedings. After I hung up, Emma and I worked quickly to pack a small suitcase. Essential medications, comfortable clothes, my favorite photographs, and the thick folder of documents Patricia had told me to gather weeks ago: medical records, financial statements, and the deed to my house. Mrs. Sullivan, Emma said as she folded my cardigan, are you sure about this? Once you walk out that door, there's no going back. Emma, let me tell you something about being 78 years old. People think age makes you fragile, makes you afraid to take risks. But the truth is, when you've lived as long as I have, you learn that the only thing really worth being afraid of is regret. I would regret letting David bully me out of my home for the rest of my life, however long that might be. We finished packing in silence. listening to David's voice getting progressively louder outside as he talked on his phone. When we crept down the back stairs with my suitcase, I could hear fragments of his conversation. I don't care what it costs. She's being unreasonable. Cognitive decline. Yes, I think we need to explore that option. Emma and I exchanged glances. He was already talking about having me declared incompetent. We made it to Emma's car without being seen, loading my bag into the trunk. But as Emma backed out of my driveway, David noticed us. He came running across the yard, waving his arms. "Mom, where are you going? You can't just leave." I rolled down the window. "I'm going somewhere safe, David. Somewhere I won't be bullied or manipulated." "Mom, please. Let's talk about this reasonably. I tried to talk to you reasonably this morning. You responded by announcing you'd sold my house behind my back. I was trying to protect you? By lying to me? By making major decisions about my life without consulting me. That's not protection, David, that's control." His face was red with frustration and embarrassment as the movers watched our family drama unfold. "Mom, if you leave now, if you fight me on this, it's gonna get ugly. I don't want that, but I can't let you live alone anymore. It's not safe." "Then maybe you should have talked to me about making it safer instead of making decisions for me." "I tried." "You wouldn't listen." "No, David. You talked at me. You made pronouncements. You never once asked what I wanted or how I felt about any of your solutions." Emma put the car in drive, and I could see David's panic rising. "Mom, wait, please. Let me dismiss the movers. Let's start over. We can work something out." For a moment I wavered. He was my son, my firstborn. The baby I had rocked through countless sleepless nights. But then I remembered the casual way he had announced the sale of my home, the dismissive tone when he talked about my capabilities, the financial calculations that put his convenience above my dignity. "David," I said gently, "if you want to work something out, you can call Patricia Warren. She's representing me now. You hired a lawyer." The betrayal in his voice was almost comical. "Mom, how could you? How could I protect myself when my own son was threatening my independence?" Very carefully and with professional help. As Emma pulled out onto the main road, I watched my cottage disappear behind the trees. For a moment, the enormity of what I was doing hit me. I was 78 years old, I was fighting my own son in court, and I had no idea when or if I would be able to return to my home. But then I thought about Robert, and what he would say if he could see me now. He'd probably laugh and tell me I was the most stubborn woman he'd ever known, and that he wouldn't have me any other way. "Mrs. Sullivan," Emma's voice was gentle, "are you okay?" "I'm scared," I admitted, "but I'm also angry, and right now the anger is stronger than the fear." "Good," she said. "You'll need that anger for what's coming next." My phone rang as we drove toward Emma's house. It was David. "Mom, please, come home. We can figure this out without lawyers and courts and all this drama." "David, you created the drama when you decided to steal my house." "I didn't steal anything." "I'm trying to take care of you." "Then let me come home and we'll discuss what taking care of me actually looks like. Let me be part of the decisions about my own life." "I can't call off the sale, Mom. The contracts are signed. But we can find you a different place, somewhere you like better." "I like my house, David. I like my home." "That's what you don't seem to understand." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder. "Mom, if you insist on fighting me on this, I'm going to have to explore other options. I've already talked to Dr. Peterson about your behavior lately." My blood ran cold. Dr. Peterson was my primary care physician, but he was also a friend of David's from the country club. "What kind of options?" "David, the kind that ensure you get the care you need, whether you think you need it or not." The line went dead. Emma had been listening to my side of the conversation, and when I told her what David had said, her face went pale. "Mrs. Sullivan, he's talking about having you declared mentally incompetent." "I know. Do you understand what that means? If a court decides you're not capable of making your own decisions, David could become your legal guardian. He could make all your choices for you, where you live, how you spend your money, even what medical care you receive." I stared out the window at the October landscape rushing by, the trees brilliant with autumn colors that might be the last I'd see from freedom if David succeeded in his plan. "Emma," I said quietly, "call Patricia Warren. Tell her it's no longer code red. Tell her it's code black." "What's code black?" "Total war." Emma's house was a modest Cape Cod-style home about 15 minutes inland from my cottage, surrounded by maple trees that were showing off their October glory. As we pulled into her driveway, I realized I knew almost nothing about Emma's personal life, despite the weeks we'd spent together during my recovery. I should have asked, I said as she helped me with my suitcase. Do you have family at home? A husband? Children? I don't want to impose on anyone. Emma smiled, the first relaxed smile I'd seen from her all day. Just me and my cat Whiskers. My ex-husband lives in California with his new wife, and my teenage daughter is with my parents in Taiwan for the school year. It's actually nice to have company. Inside, her home was warm and inviting, decorated with an interesting mix of traditional American furniture and beautiful Chinese artwork. Photos on the mantel showed a pretty teenage girl with Emma's eyes and smile. Your daughter? I asked. Lily, she's 16. She went to stay with my parents when I moved here 2 years ago. The schools there are better, and she wanted to improve her Mandarin. But I miss her terribly. As if summoned by his name, a large orange tabby cat appeared and began wending around my legs. This must be Whiskers, I said, reaching down to pet him despite my walker. He's friendly, but if he's bothering you, not at all. Robert and I always had cats. I've missed having one around. Emma showed me to a small but comfortable guest room. And I sat on the bed feeling suddenly overwhelmed by everything that had happened in just a few hours. This morning I had been in my own home, free dealing with what I thought was a manageable family disagreement. Now I was essentially in hiding, preparing for a legal battle that could determine whether I spent the rest of my life locked away in an institution. Mrs. Sullivan. Emma appeared in the doorway with a cup of tea. Patricia Warren is on the phone. I took the call in Emma's living room, with Emma sitting nearby in case Patricia needed her to witness anything else. Mrs. Sullivan. Patricia's voice was brisk and efficient. I've filed the emergency petition, and we have a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. The good news is I've managed to get a temporary restraining order that prevents the completion of the house sale and prohibits anyone from removing you from your current living situation against your will. That's wonderful, I said, relief flooding through me. The challenging news is that your son has also filed paperwork. He's petitioned the court to have you declared mentally incompetent and to be appointed as your guardian. My stomach dropped. How is that even possible? I haven't been examined by anyone. That's what we're going to fight. He's claiming that your refusal to accept his reasonable care arrangements demonstrates impaired judgment. He's also claiming that you've been influenced by your home health aide to make decisions against your own best interests. I looked at Emma, who had gone pale. He's blaming Emma? It's a common tactic. When adult children want to control their parents, they often claim that caregivers or friends are manipulating the situation for their own gain. But that's ridiculous. Emma has been nothing but professional and supportive. I know that, and you know that, but we have to prove it in court. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to prepare you for tomorrow. David will likely have Dr. Peterson there to testify about your mental state. Do you have any other medical professionals who can speak to your competence? Dr. Sarah Kim, my orthopedic surgeon. She's been monitoring my recovery from hip surgery, and she's seen me regularly for the past 6 weeks. She can speak to my mental clarity and decision-making abilities. Perfect, I'll contact her office tonight. Now, what about character witnesses? People who can testify to your independence and good judgment? I thought for a moment. My friend Helen Morrison. She's the one who recommended you. We've known each other for 40 years, and maybe some of my former teaching colleagues. Excellent. Emma, as Mrs. Sullivan's healthcare provider, your testimony will be crucial. Are you prepared to testify that she's mentally competent and capable of making her own decisions? Absolutely, Emma said firmly. I have detailed notes documenting her cognitive function, her medication management, her ability to make complex decisions about her care. She's one of the most mentally sharp patients I've ever worked with. Good. Now, Mrs. Sullivan, I have to ask you something difficult. Is there any truth to your son's claim that you've been showing signs of confusion or poor judgment lately? I considered the question carefully. Patricia, I've been grieving my husband's death. I've been recovering from surgery. I've been frustrated with David's increasingly controlling behavior, but confused. No, my judgment has been perfectly clear. I know exactly what I want and why I want it. That's what I hoped you'd say. Now, here's what's going to happen tomorrow. We'll be in front of Judge Harrison. She's fair but thorough. She'll want to speak with you directly to assess your mental state. Be honest, be clear, and don't let anyone intimidate you. After I hung up, Emma and I sat in her living room, both lost in our own thoughts. Whiskers had settled on my lap, purring contentedly, which was more comforting than I'd expected. "Emma," I said finally, "I'm sorry David dragged you into this. If testifying for me causes problems with your job—" Mrs. Sullivan, stop. "I became a nurse to help people maintain their dignity and independence for as long as possible. That's exactly what I'm doing here. But your career, my career will be fine. Besides, I've seen too many cases where families make decisions based on their own convenience rather than what's actually best for their loved one. Someone needs to speak up for you." My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Mom, it was my daughter Jennifer, calling from Seattle. David called me. He says you've lost your mind and hired a lawyer to fight him about the house." I closed my eyes. David was already working to turn my other children against me. "Jennifer, what exactly did David tell you?" "He said you're refusing to be reasonable about moving somewhere safer. He said you're being influenced by your nurse." "Mom, he's worried about you." "And what do you think, Jennifer?" There was a pause. I think I don't know what's going on, and I'm getting different stories from everyone. David says you're not thinking clearly, but you sound perfectly fine to me right now." "Your brother sold my house without asking me, Jennifer. He arranged to move me to assisted living without discussing it with me. When I objected, he threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent." "He what?" "We have a court hearing tomorrow morning. David is trying to convince a judge that I'm not capable of making my own decisions." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, are you sure you're not? I mean, sometimes after a loss like Dad. And with the surgery and everything." "Jennifer Marie," I said, using her full name the way I had when she was young, "I am thinking more clearly right now than I have in months. Your brother is trying to take control of my life and my assets, and he's willing to destroy my independence to do it. But Mom, maybe assisted living wouldn't be so bad. You'd have help when you need it and I'd have no choice about when to wake up, what to eat, when to go to bed, who I can see, or how I spend my time. Jennifer, how would you feel if someone decided you were too incompetent to live in your own home?" Another long pause. "I'd be furious." "Exactly. Mom, what can I do?" "I can't fly out there until the weekend. Just don't believe everything your brother tells you. And maybe call your brother Michael and give him the same advice." After I hung up, Emma brought me another cup of tea and a sandwich. "How do you think she took it?" "Better than I expected. Jennifer has always been more independent than David. She understands what it means to want control over your own life." "What about your other son, Michael?" I sighed. "Michael has always followed David's lead. David is 8 years older, and Michael has looked up to him since they were children. If David says I'm losing my mind, Michael will probably believe him. So it's 2 against 1, maybe. But Jennifer is a lawyer herself. Even if she doesn't practice family law, she understands the legal system, and she values evidence over emotion." Emma settled into the chair across from me. "Mrs. Sullivan, can I ask you something personal? After today, I think we're well beyond worrying about what's too personal. Why is David really doing this? I mean, I understand he's worried about you, but this feels like more than worry." I stroked Whiskers' fur, thinking about how to answer. "Emma, David has always needed to be in control. Even as a child, he had to organize his toys, plan our family activities, make sure everyone was doing what he thought they should be doing. When he was young, it was endearing. As an adult, it served him well in business. But it also means he can't accept that other people might make different choices than the ones he would make for them. When Robert got sick, David wanted to put him in a nursing home immediately. We fought about that too. What happened? Robert died at home in our bed holding my hand, just like he wanted. David never forgave me for denying his father proper medical care, even though it's exactly what Robert had asked for." Emma nodded slowly. "So this isn't really about your safety. This is about David's need to believe he knows better than everyone else what's best for them. And maybe it's also about the money. You think he wants to inherit the house. I think he wants to control the house sale and my care decisions because he's convinced he can manage my assets better than I can. He's never trusted me to handle money, even though I've been doing it successfully for 60 years. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set through Emma's living room window. Tomorrow I would walk into a courtroom and fight for the right to continue living my own life. At 78, I would have to prove to strangers that I was competent to make my own choices. "Emma," I said finally, "what if we lose? What if the judge believes David? Then we appeal, and we keep fighting until we win, and if that doesn't work. Emma smiled at me, and I saw the same determination in her eyes that I felt in my own heart. Mrs. Sullivan, I've been taking care of elderly patients for 15 years. I've seen what happens when people give up their independence too early. They fade away. But I've also seen what happens when they fight for what matters to them. They thrive, even at my age, especially at your age, Mrs. Sullivan. You have something a lot of younger people don't have. What's that? Nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. As I prepared for bed in Emma's guest room, I thought about her words. Tomorrow I would find out whether a lifetime of teaching children, managing a household, and surviving all the challenges that 78 years brings would be enough to convince a judge that I was still capable of living my own life. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I had an ally in this battle, and sometimes that's all it takes to find the courage to keep fighting. I woke up at Emma's house at 5:30 in the morning, which had been my usual time for decades. But instead of looking out at the ocean from my bedroom window, I was staring at unfamiliar walls in a room that smelled like lavender instead of salt air. For a moment, the disorientation was overwhelming. Then I remembered. Today was the day I would fight for my freedom. Emma was already awake, making coffee in her kitchen when I made my way downstairs. She had laid out my best navy blue dress, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, along with my pearl necklace and matching earrings. I thought you might want to look. She paused, searching for the right words. Competent, I finished. Dignified, like someone who's capable of making her own decisions. Exactly. We ate breakfast in relative silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts about what lay ahead. At 8:30, Patricia Warren arrived to drive us to the courthouse. She was a woman in her 50s with steel, gray hair, and the kind of confident bearing that comes from years of fighting difficult battles. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Sullivan?" she asked as we walked slowly toward the courthouse entrance. "Terrified," I admitted, "but determined." "Good. Terror keeps you sharp. Determination keeps you fighting. You'll need both today." The courthouse was an imposing brick building that had been intimidating people for over a century. As we made our way through security and up to the family court floor, I caught sight of David sitting on a bench outside the courtroom with a man I didn't recognize, presumably his lawyer. David looked up as we approached, and for just a moment, I saw my little boy in his face. The child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when he found a dead bird in the yard, who hugged me so tight when I dropped him off for his first day of school. Then his expression hardened, and he was once again the stranger who had tried to steal my life. "Mom," he said, standing up, "it's not too late. We can call this off right now if you'll just be reasonable." "Being reasonable," I replied, "would have been asking me what I wanted instead of making decisions for me." His lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit, stepped forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm James Mitchell. I represent your son. He's genuinely concerned about your welfare." "If he's concerned about my welfare, Mr. Mitchell, he can start by returning my house keys and canceling whatever arrangements he's made for my incarceration." David's face flushed. "Mom, assisted living isn't incarceration. When it's against my will, it certainly is." Patricia placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Mrs. Sullivan, let's save our arguments for the courtroom." Judge Harrison's courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with worn wooden benches and tall windows that let in streams of autumn sunlight. Judge Harrison herself was a woman about my daughter's age, with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. "We're here today," she began, "to consider two petitions. Mr. Sullivan has petitioned to be appointed guardian of his mother, Margaret Sullivan, claiming she lacks the capacity to make decisions about her living situation and financial affairs. Mrs. Sullivan, through her attorney, has petitioned for a restraining order to prevent the sale of her house and to prohibit forced relocation to assisted living." She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Sullivan, do you understand why we're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor. My son is trying to convince you that I'm not competent to live in my own home or make my own decisions. I'm here to prove that I am." "And how old are you, Mrs. Sullivan?" 78, Your Honor. "And you live alone?" "I do. I have a home health aide who helps me 3 times a week. But yes, I live independently in the house I've called home for 40 years. Judge Harrison made some notes, then looked at David's lawyer. "Mr. Mitchell, please present your case." What followed was the most painful hour of my life. David's lawyer painted a picture of a stubborn, confused old woman who was putting herself in danger by refusing reasonable care. they had Dr. Peterson testify via phone that I had seemed disoriented during my last visit and that my insistence on living alone showed poor judgment for someone in my condition. Then David took the stand. "Your Honor," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I love my mother. She's been the strongest person I know my whole life. But since my father died, and especially since her surgery, she's changed. She's become unreasonable, suspicious of people trying to help her. She's isolated herself in that house, and I'm terrified something will happen to her." "Can you give me specific examples of this changed behavior?" Judge Harrison asked. "She refused to consider moving to a safer living situation, even after I showed her several nice facilities. She became hostile when I suggested selling the house. She hired a lawyer without telling me and left her home to stay with her nurse, which seems like evidence that she's being influenced by someone who might not have her best interests at heart." I wanted to jump up and scream that every single thing he'd said was either a lie or a distortion of the truth. But Patricia had coached me to stay calm and wait my turn. "Mr. Sullivan," Judge Harrison said, "did you discuss the sale of your mother's house with her before you initiated it?" David hesitated. "I tried to discuss it, Your Honor, but she wouldn't listen to reason." "That's not what I asked. Did you tell her you were planning to sell the house?" Another hesitation. "I thought it would be easier to present her with a solution rather than argue about problems." "So you did not tell her you were selling her house before you did it?" "No, Your Honor. But—" "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan." Then it was our turn. Patricia called Emma to the stand first. "Ms. Chen, you are a registered nurse with 15 years of experience in elder care. Is that correct?" "Yes. And you've been caring for Mrs. Sullivan for approximately 6 weeks." "That's correct." "In your professional opinion, is Mrs. Sullivan mentally competent?" "Absolutely. She manages her own medications, makes complex decisions about her care, handles her finances, maintains social relationships, and demonstrates excellent judgment about her daily activities." "Have you ever seen any signs of confusion, disorientation, or cognitive decline?" "None whatsoever. Mrs. Sullivan is one of the most mentally sharp patients I've ever worked with." "Ms. Chen, have you influenced Mrs. Sullivan's decisions about her living situation in any way?" Emma sat up straighter. "I have provided her with information about her options and supported whatever decisions she made for herself. My job is to help patients maintain their independence safely, not to make decisions for them." David's lawyer tried to suggest that Emma had financial motives for keeping me at home, but Emma calmly pointed out that assisted living facilities also employ nurses, and she would have no trouble finding other work if I moved. Then Dr. Sarah Kim testified via video call from her office. She had reviewed my complete medical records and confirmed that while I had some physical limitations from my surgery, there was absolutely no evidence of cognitive impairment. Dr. Peterson's notes, she said looking directly at the camera, indicate that Mrs. Sullivan seemed disoriented during her last visit. However, that visit took place the morning after her son had informed her that he'd sold her house without her knowledge. I would expect anyone to seem disoriented under those circumstances. Finally, it was my turn to testify. Patricia led me through a series of questions designed to demonstrate my mental clarity. I recited my address, phone number, and social security number. I explained my daily routine, my medical care, my financial situation. I discussed my reasons for wanting to stay in my home and my plans for maintaining my safety there. Then David's lawyer had his chance to cross-examine me. "Mrs. Sullivan, don't you think your son knows what's best for you?" "Mr. Mitchell, my son is 52 years old. I'm 78. I've been making decisions about what's best for me for 60 years longer than he has." "But surely you can see that living alone at your age is risky." "Everything is risky at my age, Mr. Mitchell. Getting out of bed is risky. Taking a shower is risky. But so is giving up your independence and losing the will to live. Or Mrs. Sullivan, wouldn't you be happier in a place where you have companionship and activities?" I looked directly at Judge Harrison. "Your Honor, I've been a teacher for 30 years and a mother for 52. I've spent my entire adult life taking care of other people. Now, for the first time in my life, I have the freedom to wake up when I want, eat what I want, spend my days however I choose. I've earned that freedom. I don't want to give it up until I absolutely have to. But what if something happens to you? Then something happens to me. I'd rather live 6 months in my own home making my own choices than 6 years in an institution having choices made for me." After all the testimony was complete, Judge Harrison asked to speak with me privately in her chambers. It was just the two of us, sitting across from each other in her book-lined office. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said, "I want you to understand something. If I grant your son's petition, you will lose the legal right to make decisions about where you live, how you spend your money, and what medical care you receive. Do you understand that?" "Yes, Your Honor. And if I deny his petition, you will have the legal right to make those decisions, even if other people think they're bad decisions. Do you understand that too?" "Yes, Your Honor," or Mrs. Sullivan, in your opinion? Are you capable of making reasonable decisions about your own life? I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The secret meetings with Patricia Warren, the careful documentation of my cognitive abilities, the courage it had taken to leave my home and fight this battle. "Your Honor," I said, "I may not make the same decisions other people would make for me, but yes, I am fully capable of making reasonable decisions about my own life." She nodded slowly. "That's what I wanted to hear." When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison delivered her ruling. "I find no evidence that Mrs. Sullivan lacks the mental capacity to make decisions about her living situation, her finances, or her medical care. While her son's concerns about her safety are understandable and come from a place of love, they do not justify removing her legal rights." My knees nearly gave out with relief. "Therefore, I am denying the petition for guardianship. I am also granting the restraining order preventing the completion of the house sale and prohibiting anyone from forcing Mrs. Sullivan to relocate against her will." David's face went white. "Your Honor, what if something happens to her?" Judge Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Sullivan, your mother is a 78-year-old woman who has successfully navigated 7 decades of life's challenges. I think she's earned the right to make her own decisions about how to handle whatever comes next." As we left the courtroom, David tried one more time. "Mom, please. Can't we work together on this?" I stopped and looked at my son, really looked at him. "David, if you want to work together, we can work together. But it has to be actual collaboration. Not you making decisions and expecting me to go along with them. I just want you to be safe. Then help me be safe in my own home, instead of trying to lock me away somewhere else." For the first time in months, I saw a crack in David's certainty. I don't know how to do that." "Then maybe it's time you learned." As Patricia, Emma, and I walked out of the courthouse into the bright October sunshine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged, fighting for exactly what mattered. I had won my independence back. Now I had to figure out how to keep it. 3 days after the court hearing, I stood on the front porch of my cottage, key in hand, almost afraid to go inside. Emma waited beside me, carrying my small suitcase and wearing the patient expression of someone who understood that some moments needed to be taken slowly. "Take your time, Mrs. Sullivan," she said gently. The moving truck was gone from my driveway. David's SUV was nowhere to be seen. The only evidence of that terrible morning was a few scuff marks on the porch steps where the movers had carried their empty boxes. I unlocked the door and stepped into my home. Everything was exactly as I had left it. My coffee cup still sat on the kitchen counter, a ring of brown staining the bottom. The newspaper from 3 days ago was still folded beside my favorite chair. The photograph of Robert and me on our wedding day still smiled at me from the mantel. But something felt different. It took me a moment to realize what it was. For the first time in months, my house felt truly mine again. "How does it feel?" Emma asked, setting my suitcase down in the hallway. "Like coming back from the dead," I said, and was surprised to find tears on my cheeks. That first week back was a mixture of joy and adjustment. I had won the legal battle, but the emotional aftermath was more complicated than I had expected. David hadn't called once since the court hearing. Jennifer had called every day, but our conversations were stilted, full of careful questions and diplomatic answers. Michael had sent a brief text saying he was glad things worked out, but nothing more. The house sale had been officially canceled, though not without complications. The buyers were threatening to sue David for misrepresentation, and there were legal fees and penalties to sort out. Patricia Warren assured me that David would be responsible for all costs related to his unauthorized sale, but the whole mess would take months to resolve completely. "The important thing," she told me during one of our phone calls, "is that your home is safe. Everything else is just paperwork." Emma continued coming 3 times a week, but our relationship had evolved beyond the typical nurse-patient dynamic. She was now my friend, my co-conspirator. and sometimes my voice of reason when the isolation of living alone started to feel overwhelming. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said one morning as we walked slowly along the beach path, "have you thought about what you want your life to look like going forward?" It was a good question. I had spent so much energy fighting to keep my old life that I hadn't given much thought to what kind of new life I wanted to build. "I want to stay in my house," I said. "That much I know for certain. But what else? You can't spend the rest of your years just defending your independence. What do you want to do with it?" I thought about this as we walked. The October air was crisp, and the ocean was that particular shade of gray, blue that only came with autumn storms brewing on the horizon. "I want to garden again," I said finally. "I want to plant flowers that will bloom next spring. I want to read all the books I've been meaning to get to. I want to cook meals I actually enjoy instead of just eating whatever's convenient." Those are all good starts. What about people? Friends? I don't have many friends left, Emma. Most of the people my age are either gone or in places like the one David wanted to put me in. What about making new friends? At 78. Why not at 78? "Mrs. Sullivan? You just proved in court that you're mentally sharper than most people half your age. You're funny, you're interesting, you have decades of stories and experiences. Why wouldn't people want to be your friend?" The idea was both appealing and terrifying. I had spent so much of the past 2 years focused on grieving Robert and recovering from surgery that I had forgotten what it felt like to think about the future with anticipation instead of dread. That afternoon, Emma made a suggestion that surprised me. "Mrs. Sullivan, what would you think about volunteering somewhere? Maybe reading to children at the library, or helping at a literacy program. I haven't taught in 15 years, Emma. But you were good at it, weren't you?" I smiled, remembering my classroom full of 7-year-olds. Their eager faces turned toward me during story time. I was very good at it. Then maybe it's time to be good at it again. The following week, Emma drove me to the Oceanside Community Center, where they ran an after-school tutoring program for children who needed extra help with reading. The director, an energetic woman named Carol, was delighted to meet me. "A retired teacher with 40 years of experience," she said. "Mrs. Sullivan, you're exactly what we need. We have several children who are struggling with reading comprehension, and they could really benefit from working with someone who has your experience." Within an hour, I was sitting at a small table with an 8-year-old named Marcus, helping him sound out words in a book about dinosaurs. His concentration was fierce, his determination to master each sentence reminding me of all the children I had taught over the years. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said when we finished the first chapter, "will you be here next week?" "I'll be here every week," I promised him, and realized I meant it. Driving home that day, Emma was quiet for a long time before she spoke. "You look different," she said finally. "Different how? Happy? Like you remember what it feels like to be needed for something positive, instead of just fighting to not be controlled." She was right. For months, I had defined myself by what I was fighting against: David's control, unwanted changes, the loss of my independence. But working with Marcus reminded me who I was when I wasn't fighting: a teacher, a helper, someone who had something valuable to offer. That evening, as I prepared dinner in my own kitchen for the first time in weeks, my phone rang. It was David. "Mum." His voice was tentative, uncertain. "Hello, David. I wanted to call and see how you're doing." "I'm doing well. I started volunteering at the community center this week. I'm tutoring children who need help with reading." There was a long pause. That sounds like something you'd enjoy." "I am enjoying it. Very much." Another pause. "Mum, I've been thinking about what you said. About working together instead of me making decisions for you." I set down my wooden spoon and gave him my full attention. "What does that look like to you, David?" "I don't know yet. But I realize I handled everything wrong. I was scared about you being alone, and I thought I knew what was best. And I didn't listen to what you actually wanted. You didn't listen to me at all." "I know. I'm sorry." His voice was thick with emotion. "Mom, I almost lost you. Not just physically, but you looked at me in that courtroom like I was a stranger. Like you didn't even know who I was. David, for a while there, I didn't know who you were. The son I raised would never have sold my house behind my back. I thought I was protecting you. I know you did. But David, protection that comes at the cost of someone's dignity and freedom isn't protection. It's imprisonment. I'm starting to understand that. Mom, would you be willing to start over?" to work together on figuring out how to keep you safe and independent at the same time. I thought about my day with Marcus, about the way his face had lit up when he successfully read a difficult sentence. I thought about Emma's friendship, about Patricia Warren's fierce advocacy, about Judge Harrison's wise ruling. I thought about all the people who had supported my right to make my own choices, even when those choices involved risk. David, I said, I'd be willing to try, but it has to be real collaboration. That means you ask me what I want before you make any suggestions. It means you respect my decisions even if you don't agree with them. And it means you remember that I'm your mother, not your child. I can do that. I want to do that. Good, then maybe you could start by coming over this weekend and fixing that loose board on the back steps. The one you've been promising to repair for 2 years. I heard him chuckle, the first genuine laughter I'd heard from him in months. I'll bring my tools on Saturday morning. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen looking out at the ocean through the window above my sink. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and pink that no assisted living facility could ever replicate. I thought about all the battles I had fought in my 8 years for my education when women weren't encouraged to go to college, for my career when married women were expected to stay home, for my children's futures when money was tight, for my husband's dignity when he was dying, and finally, for my own independence when my family thought I was too old to make my own choices. Each battle had taught me something important, that the things worth having were worth fighting for, that dignity was more valuable than safety, and that age was not the same thing as incompetence. But this latest battle had taught me something else, that fighting for the right to live your own life was only the beginning. Once you won that right, you had to figure out what to do with it. As I prepared for bed in my own room, in my own house, surrounded by 40 years of memories and a future full of possibilities, I realized that Emma had been right. I did look different now. I looked like a woman who had remembered not just how to fight for her independence, but how to live it. Tomorrow I would wake up in my own bed, make my own breakfast, and spend my day however I chose to spend it. And next week, I would sit with Marcus again and help him discover the magic of words coming together to tell a story. At 78, I was finally learning that independence wasn't just about the right to make your own choices. It was about making choices that reminded you who you were and what you had to offer the world. And I still had plenty to offer 6 months after the courtroom battle that nearly cost me everything. I was standing in my garden on a warm April morning, watching David hammer the last nail into a wheelchair ramp he'd built for my front steps. It wasn't that I needed a wheelchair, my hip had healed beautifully, and I was walking with just a cane now, but the ramp made it easier for me to navigate with groceries, and it would be there if I ever needed it in the future. "How's that look, Mom?" David asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It looks perfect," I said, and meant it. "Thank you." The past 6 months had been a journey of rebuilding trust and redefining our relationship. David had kept his promise about collaboration, though it hadn't been easy for either of us. He still had the instinct to take charge, and I still had the instinct to resist any suggestion that felt like control. But we were learning. He had also kept his promise about the back steps, the leaky roof, and a dozen other repairs the house had needed. More importantly, he had learned to ask me what I wanted before proposing solutions. "David," I said as he packed up his tools, "I have something to tell you." He looked up, and I could see the flash of anxiety in his eyes. Old habits of worry died hard. "I've been thinking about making some changes to my will and estate planning." "Mom, you don't need to." "I do need to, and I want to involve you in the process. But as a consultant, not as someone making decisions for me." He nodded slowly. "What are you thinking?" "I want to make sure the house stays in the family. But I also want to make sure I have resources set aside for my own care if I need it someday. I'd like to talk to you about setting up some kind of trust that accomplishes both goals. I'd be honored to help you with that." "Good. And David, I want to do this while I'm healthy and thinking clearly, so there's never any question about my intentions." He smiled, a real smile, not the strained expression he'd worn for so many months before our courtroom battle. "That sounds like the smartest thing either of us has said about estate planning." After David left, I walked down to the beach for my morning stroll. The sand was firm under my feet, and the April sun felt warm on my shoulders. I had made this walk nearly every day for 40 years, but it felt different now, not like a routine I clung to, but like a choice I made because it brought me joy. Emma found me there, sitting on the driftwood log where Robert and I used to watch the sunrise together. How did the ramp project go? She asked, settling beside me. Perfectly. David did beautiful work, and more importantly, he didn't lecture me once about why I needed it. Emma laughed. Progress, definitely progress. I turned to look at her. Emma, I have news. Good news or challenging news? Good news, I think. Lily is coming to visit you next month, isn't she? Emma's face lit up. Yes. She's finally going to spend the summer here instead of staying in Taiwan. I'm so excited I can barely contain myself. Well, I was wondering, would you and Lily like to move into my guest room for the summer? It would be wonderful to have young energy in the house, and Lily could have her own space while still being close to you. Emma stared at me. Mrs. Sullivan, are you serious? Completely serious. This house is too big for one person, and I've missed having family around. Besides, Lily could help me in the garden, and I could help her with her English if she wants. She would love that. And honestly, the apartment I'm renting isn't big enough for both of us, so you'd be solving a real problem for me. Then it settled. We'll be housemates for the summer. As we walked back toward the house, Emma was quiet for a moment before speaking. Mrs. Sullivan, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? The whole battle with David, the court case. All of it. I thought about her question as we climbed the gentle slope back to my cottage. Emma, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that David and I both said things that hurt each other. I regret the stress and the legal bills and the family tension. But I don't regret fighting for my right to live my own life. If I had let David move me to assisted living, if I had given up my independence without a fight, I would have spent whatever time I have left feeling like a victim. Instead, I get to spend it feeling like myself. And what does that look like? I gestured toward my cottage, where the garden was already showing the green shoots of spring flowers I had planted last fall. In a few weeks there would be daffodils and tulips, then irises and peonies, then the summer roses that would bloom until October. It looks like this, I said. My home, my choices, my life lived on my terms. That afternoon I was in my kitchen preparing dinner when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window I saw Jennifer getting out of a rental car, looking uncertain about her reception. I hadn't seen my daughter since Robert's funeral 2 years ago. We had talked on the phone regularly since the court case, but our conversations had been careful, both of us stepping around the complicated family dynamics that had emerged during my fight with David. Mom, she said when I opened the door, I hope you don't mind that I didn't call first. I was in Boston for a conference, and I wanted to see you. Jennifer, this is your home. You never need to call first. She hugged me tightly, and I could feel some of the tension leave her shoulders. I missed you, she said. I missed you too. Over dinner, we talked about her work, her children, her life in Seattle. But eventually, the conversation turned to the events of last October. Mom? I owe you an apology, Jennifer said. When David first called me about the house, I thought maybe he was right. I thought maybe you were being stubborn about accepting help. And now I realize that accepting help and giving up control are two completely different things. I saw what you've built here, your volunteer work, your friendship with Emma, your peace with yourself. If David had succeeded in moving you to assisted living, all of that would have been lost. Jennifer, your brother wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to protect me. I know. But Mom, protection that diminishes someone isn't really protection. It's just fear disguised as love. That evening, as Jennifer and I sat on the front porch watching the sunset, she asked me the same question Emma had asked months ago. Mom, what do you want your life to look like going forward? I want to keep teaching children to read. I want to keep tending my garden. I want to watch Emma's daughter discover America this summer. I want to have Sunday dinners with David and his children, and maybe even convince Michael to visit once in a while. What about your health? What if you need more care someday? Then I'll figure it out when that day comes. Jennifer, I'm not naive about aging. I know there may come a time when I can't live independently. But I want that decision to be mine to make, based on my actual needs, not on other people's fears about what might happen. And if David tries to interfere again, I smiled. Your brother has learned that his 78-year-old mother is more formidable than he realized. I don't think he'll make that mistake again. Jennifer laughed. You know, Mom, when I was growing up, you always seemed so conventional. The teacher, the mother, the dutiful wife. I never realized how fierce you were underneath all that. I wasn't always fierce, sweetheart. But life has a way of teaching you that sometimes you have to fight for the things that matter most. The next morning, I walked Jennifer to her car, sad to see her go but grateful for the time we'd had together. I'll be back soon, she promised. And next time, I'm bringing the grandkids to meet their formidable grandmother. I'd like that very much. After she left, I sat in my garden with my morning coffee, watching the daffodils that were just beginning to open their bright yellow faces to the sun. In a few hours, free, I would drive to the community center where Marcus and 3 other children would be waiting for their weekly reading lesson. Tomorrow, Emma and I would go grocery shopping and plan meals for the week. This weekend, David would come by to help me plant the vegetable garden we had planned together. It was a simple life, but it was mine. At 78, I had learned that independence wasn't about never needing help. It was about being able to choose when, how, and from whom you accepted that help. It wasn't about never taking risks. It was about being able to decide which risks were worth taking for the sake of living the life you wanted. Most importantly, I had learned that age was not a disease to be managed or a problem to be solved. It was simply another stage of life to be lived with dignity, purpose, and joy. I thought about the woman who had sat in this same garden 6 months ago, paralyzed by grief and uncertainty about her future. She had been so focused on what she was losing, her husband, her health, her independence, that she had forgotten to look for what she might still gain. That woman could never have imagined the battles that lay ahead, or the strength she would find to fight them. She could never have imagined the friendships that would emerge from crisis, or the family relationships that would be rebuilt on stronger foundations. She could never have imagined that at 78 she would discover new ways to be useful, new sources of joy, and new reasons to wake up each morning excited about the day ahead. As I sat in my garden, surrounded by the promise of spring and the certainty of my own choices, I raised my coffee cup in a toast to that frightened woman I had been. "Thank you," I said aloud, "for not giving up. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for believing that your life was worth defending." Then I finished my coffee, picked up my car keys, and drove to the community center where 4 children were waiting for their reading teacher. At 78, Margaret Sullivan was just getting started. And that's my story. The story of how I almost lost everything that mattered to me, and how I fought to get it back. If you're listening to this and you're facing your own battle for independence, or if you love someone who is, please remember this: age is not surrender. Needing help is not the same as giving up control. And it's never too late to fight for the life you want to live. Thank you for listening, and thank you for subscribing. Your support helps ensure that stories like mine reach the people who need to hear them most. Until next time, this is Margaret Sullivan, reminding you that sometimes the most important battles are fought not for what we want to gain, but for what we refuse to lose,